How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to the Iternal Technologies podcast. We're super excited to introduce a very exciting guest, the co-founder and chief technology officer of Denvr DataWorks, Kyle McCrindle. Very nice to welcome you to the podcast. And then in addition to that, we've also got our CTO, Steve Williams, is joining us as well, and they're going to talk about technology.
Hey guys, and thanks for the really nice warm introduction, John. It's gonna be super fun today.
Very good. So I want to just kick things off and would love to hear both of you talk a little bit about your backgrounds. I think that you've got a really interesting journey, definitely Kyle on the data center side with the exciting AI technologies that you're building at Denvr for infrastructure. And then Steve, you've of course got a really interesting background as it relates to software development efforts that you've done for many years. So excited to kind of bring the infrastructure and the software together in an exciting way and talk about our partnership between Iternal and Denvr as well. Lots going on.
Yeah, amazing. So why don't I get started then on my background? So I'm based in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. Went to University of Waterloo. And so when I came out of school, and I was saying maybe pause for a second of like, should I disclose all my ages? But I have been in the industry for over 30 years now. And I started working in Canadian banks. So this was in capital markets, electronic trading. And so it was always big systems, global systems. And really, it's a deep background of reliability, scalability, operations. These things have to happen. It's regulated environments. So that was kind of a really big kind of influence on my life. And then I kind of always paired that with a bit of an entrepreneurial side of saying, what do I think is not working? What is not efficient? How to improve things? How to automate? So kind of the normal computer science view. And maybe just to even skip to the end of where we are now, we'll get back to the middle again. But with AI, what I really think is interesting is a lot of the focus is on research, of course. Where is the industry going? But a lot of the AI stuff that we're actually like the real problems in AI, a lot of it is systems design engineering, how to operate the computers, how to run the computers, how to be resilient. In some ways, it's a bit of an afterthought, and that's certainly part of Denvr DataWorks is kind of we're delivering and deploying at the edge. And some of that stuff is really hard. Like, of course, people know how to run LLM Studio. You can run stuff on your laptop. It's really cool. But running it at scale for customers, it's a different business. And it is systems design. So I see a lot of stuff as like as an intersection of software engineering and AI engineering. So it's kind of really fun to see those things pull together at this point in time. Anyways, that's a quick bit of my background.
Awesome. Steve?
Yeah, so I've been doing this job for about 15 years now. My first 10 years, I was out in Silicon Valley working at kind of the big tech companies, Cisco, Google, Uber. Finished off Uber at the Advanced Technologies Group working on autonomous vehicles for a couple of years. And the big kind of thing that I kept on running into was how do we productize it? You know, we can have the best systems, we can have the best everything. How do we get it into people's hands and make it something where they can actually use it to accomplish their job, accomplish the task, you know, push things forward. So anyway, about 5 years ago, I joined Iternal, started working with John. He convinced me to come over. The original thing actually he wanted for the prototype, you know, he kind of described it and said, you know, hey, here's what we want. And actually was, I estimated around 50 hours of work for a complete prototype, 150 hours total work for an MVP. And kind of just saying like, hey, you know, let's get this and see where it goes. Anyway, scope creep happened.
I'm the master of scope creep.
You are the master of scope creep. So anyway, 5 years later, here we are. We initially started out working on enterprise automation, like comms automation. You know, how do you make a video that's personalized to, you know, 100 people, 1,000 people without having to spend a ton of effort on it? Anyway, about 2 years in, Gen AI revolution happened, and now we're saying, okay, this is a turbocharger for us. You know, before we were doing, you know, flow charts and whatnot, rules engines, if trees, and so on, and you know, it has its place. But being able to actually truly have something that is decently unique and personalized to any one person is game changer. So yeah, my focus is also on how do we, we have all this Gen AI tech. That's great, but no, people don't want to just, talk to Chat GPT all day as their job and copy and paste stuff in and out of it. So how do we really wrap a good product around that actually it makes it something where, hey, we can write a proposal, hey, we can run a marketing campaign, hey, we can, enable all of our sellers to have the right message, the right information, and kind of just read from a script. So that's my main focus. Now, as part of that, well, as part of that, obviously we need to have an infra side. And I have a pretty big security background in my career. Cisco, I was at the Security Technologies business unit at Google. It was in the anti-abuse team. So I'm definitely aware of exactly how wrong a lot of this stuff can go. And because of that, that's why we put so many security features into the Iternal platform as we were building it in terms of isolated deployments, dedicated resources, dedicated hardware. But we also need to extend that to the AI side as well. And that's where I really see Denvr coming in.
Yeah, Kyle, I was going to ask this when we started this podcast series a month or two ago, and one of the first questions I asked John, and I always want to talk when we meet companies, I love to hear the origin story of why the company was founded, why it was built. And I realize your title is not only CTO, but you're also a co-founder. So I'd love if you wouldn't mind sharing with the audience, why did y'all build this company?
Yeah, and you know what, like it's really kind of interesting when I kind of retrospect on it myself, because I mean we're at here as a company at scale right now, Denvr DataWorks, but call it 2017, there was like 3 of us. And so what does a company look like when there's literally 3 people? And that was kind of like the co-founders, and it's like we had like the revenue leader, the CTO, and we were all really technical, but I was the computer scientist of the group. So it's like, let's just start from that as an interesting thing. It's like, it's disoriented and it's really interesting, especially coming from companies that have like 40, 80,000 people in them. But yeah, so where did it start? So yeah, when I joined with my colleagues, Jeff Gordon, Dave King, as the original co-founders, what we were kind of always interested in is we had come from financial background and payments, services, and risk engines. So again, very similar to like cybersecurity and the focus on secure operations. But our intent was actually high frequency trading, electronic trading. And so we were kind of noodling around on those things and seeing what was going. And it was kind of, yeah, we had moved away from our prior jobs, and we were kind of just researching and playing and talking. And so as we're doing like decision tree algorithmics, trying to understand the marketplace, one of the things we actually kind of stumbled into, so call this around 2017, 18, was some of Google's products. And so for machine learning, to see like, because ultimately it was like everyone kind of knew even back then, machine learning is about pattern recognition. And to the extent that you're actually allowed to predict the future, which is kind of arguable anyways in finance land, but you try to find patterns to predict the future, and then that makes an arbitrage opportunity. So we were starting to use the machine learning side of Google, and we're like, wow, this is actually really expensive. It was kind of surprising what it was and what it cost, but it was also gave us really strong signals. So we're like, this is probably a direction we need to be looking at. And then we're looking at the expense of it, and we're saying, well, we probably need to do this on-prem, and we need more power. And so, but then we kind of really started bumping into like what's going on in the industry. This is kind of like late V100 era. Computers, the V100s are sitting around 6,500 watts per. And the way we're just looking at it is like, as not necessarily, I wouldn't call us outsiders, but we weren't AI and HPC people. But all we kind of saw was like this line basically going linearly hard up to the right of power demands. And a lot of Jeff's background too is in mechanical engineering and facility space. And so we're just like, what is going on? Because there's just a linear projection, and the wall and the ceiling are just going to get hit, and there's no opportunities. And it was really kind of surprising, and we were trying to orient ourselves to say, how could you possibly host to GPUs in the future based on existing tech? And so then we were always quite aware of what the crypto people were doing. Bitcoin had they were first because they're kind of a mining and industrialization process. They were almost the first to kind of reinvigorate the concept of liquid cooling, single phase liquid, basically taking computers, throwing them in oil. Again, I'll just trivialize the details there for a bit. But they had a solution. They knew how to adapt the ASICs and the computers to work in that environment. And pulling heat out through direct liquid was a game changer for crypto. And then we're like, well, maybe it's a little bit of a Western sort of thing, or like it's a little bit cowboyish, but there's also threads of really good interest there. So we ended up kind of working into a research project to figure out what's going on here, and how does HPC and GPUs work in a liquid immersion environment. I mean, again, some of the deep interesting stuff is the OG computers, the Cray supercomputers, which were always kind of legendary out of the 90s, they were liquid cooled. So some of the history that we've learned, of course, is that like liquid cooling exists. It's been out alive for like 40, 50 years. But it wasn't really necessary. It creates some complications. It wasn't necessary for the last bunch of years. But now we're certainly getting into a spot with the new products. The DGX H100s are sitting around 10 kilowatts. You got even more when you're talking GPU fabrics. So there's now a really big new push on liquid. It's basically mandatory. And so now the question is going to be, how does the industry really sort itself out between single phase, two phase, and direct to chip? So it's really kind of an interesting space as the data center facilities are kind of being reinterpreted, reimagined. You've got field deployed. I'll just kind of make up a number and just say like 100 of gigawatt deployed, whatever the number is, it's massive. And it's not suited for AI per se, because it's engineered air. Typically, we're talking like 15 to 20 kilowatts a rack. Now you've got one computer taking half of that down. And also, actually, this is another kind of funny thing too, is that the unit of work that most AI training people now want is like a super pod. So it's like 128 nodes, 1,000 GPUs, whereas researchers were able to use one GPU and fractional GPUs, and this was only like 2 years ago. ChatGPT was just such an interesting step function to the industry, and it really basically took a sideswipe at every part of the ecosystem. And so it's been really, I think, fun and interesting to watch how that's kind of rippled and through.
Yeah, the change has been just insane. I mean, what a time to look at the evolution of technology. The other day, a Llama 3.2 model came out. It's a 3 billion parameter model. And we've been playing around a lot with that. And while it's not quite perfect from a benchmarking standpoint, like it's pretty close to parity with that first release of ChatGPT. And we're like a year and a half, almost 2 years now, right? November of 2022 since that was released. And we've gone from, I don't know what the exact compute requirement was for the original ChatGPT, but it was like rather substantial, I remember. And we're at the point now where you can run one of these models locally at a fraction of the size and get pretty much the same results. I mean, talk about an acceleration. So I think it's really cool. But Stephen, a question for you, because you've kind of been talking, we've had a lot of conversations about infrastructure. I've learned more about infrastructure than somebody with a filmmaking degree and a film production company ever experienced or thought would experience learning. So, as you've talked about this concept around highly available, highly scalable infrastructure, the thing that sold me on this massive investment that you made into building out our infrastructure a couple of years ago was you said, basically, John, this is going to take me and my team like a year and a half to do. But when we do it, the analogy that I would give is to be able to support 1,000 enterprise customers with single tenanted, fully isolated, zero trust environments. It would have taken me 300 engineers of great talent to do that manually at a place like Uber. Or I could automate and orchestrate everything and do that same quality of engineering, same quality of infrastructure, single tenanted all the way through with updates being pushed out CI/CD with 8 engineers. And it would take a year and a half to do that. And I was sold when I heard it. A year and a half is a scary amount of time to basically see no immediate business return. But it's, I mean, paid in spades as we've scaled. So talk to me a little bit about your strategy and thoughts behind that approach, and then also how we see the Denvr offerings in the Denvr cloud coming into play as we build that out more.
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, obviously, about 3-4 years ago, the main thing at that time was just everything was in Terraform, and everyone was writing manual HCL files. HCL is HashiCorp configuration language, and that worked pretty well in terms of actually saying, like, look, all of our stuff's centrally managed. You don't have to worry that somebody did something clever and went and configured AWS slightly differently or changed something around here. But the real problem was that it was all kind of manually managed. So we were early adopters of the Terraform CDK, Cloud Development Kit. And that's actually been a huge win because, right now it lets us actually write simple TypeScript code to say, like, look, what do we want for this customer? How do we want to configure them? Do we want to put them in this mode or that mode or whatever? And we can kind of just write that ourselves in simple scripting language before we actually create the resources. So that's been a huge win. And the other really kind of huge win, and this is kind of where we're excited to work with Denvr on this, is, we're talking about making it really easy to deploy some of these AI resources. We can, be much more flexible with this approach in terms of saying, like, hey, does Denvr have a Terraform provider? Maybe yes, maybe no. Do we need to hit an API endpoint to do something? Like, what do we need to do to actually provision resources? We're, Kyle, you mentioned, eventually adding a inference as a service, tokens as a service kind of thing. Okay, great. Let's spin up a new account. That's probably an API call, with a credit card and, something and saying, like, look, here's my estimated capacity. Great. We can just do that. And we can offer every single customer completely isolated resources, which really just kind of gets us through IT security review. It puts in place architectural barriers, not just application things. In terms of, hey, there's misconfiguration, because we're going to make mistakes. Our engineers, I've never worked somewhere where nobody ever messed up and pushed something to prod that they shouldn't have, or,
hey, we're doing pretty good, though. We haven't made that mistake yet, and we're 6 years in, so it's going well so far.
You just haven't heard about some of the bad ones. No, I'm teasing. Yeah, no, the real kind of thing with that is just making it so, hey, even if something goes wrong, then something breaks, it doesn't expose data. If something breaks and the service goes down, maybe we get an irritated, email or phone call saying, hey, your thing's down. That's very survivable from a business standpoint. In fact, I actually saw some research that having one of those a year or something and quickly jumping on it is actually beneficial to the business, which is kind of counterintuitive, but interesting. But if the data is leaked, that's where suddenly, okay, we need to reevaluate the contract and, do we feel confident with you going forward? So we've been really, we got pretty lucky in terms of how well that worked. It was definitely a huge headache to do from the beginning, because in the early stages, CDKTF was completely overhauling everything. I was just talking to our head of infra, and we were kind of reminiscing about this and thinking about it, a couple of years ago when they did a v0.10 to v0.11, and they fractally renamed and fractally restructured every single data structure in the entire library. And I mean, it's pre-version 1, it's, yeah, every change is a breaking change, but it's just like, my God, like, great, now we just got to rewrite everything. So yeah, the real kind of thing where I'm excited to move forward with Denvr on this is just saying, hey, let's give each customer dedicated AI resources that are right size to them, and that we don't have to manage the underlying hardware. We can kind of just count on it being reliable, regardless of what kind of workload we throw at it.
Yeah, let me just kind of add to that, because I think you really bring up some good points and features of what we're trying to do at Denvr Cloud. So kind of one of my missions that I put in my mind is ease of use, because we're not a general purpose cloud. We've got enough hyperscalers and they do a wonderful job. God bless them. I use them too. But our focus is on the AI, the training, the inferencing, And to some degree, of course, it's like as AI hardware is kind of taking over HPC, of course, we can support all those other workloads. But it's the ease of use factor. So many of our end users are actually what you call end users. They're researchers. So they're sitting in Jupyter Lab notebooks on our systems. They're doing work. But we used to talk to some of the people, the researchers early on in our lives, call it like 2 years ago. But it's like, how much time are you spending managing your infrastructure as a service through like an Amazon provider? And they're like, yeah, it's kind of like 60 to 80%. And it's like, because it's like setting up your organization, your VPCs, your security groups. And as a researcher, do you know what those things mean? And are you making the right decisions? So a lot of like the AI groups, they're led by their researchers, but their software engineering discipline is kind of a distant second. So the answer is that a lot of people, they do want to outsource that. They want help because it's not a core part of their business. So where do we come then is there's a lot of user personas that we're trying to deliver. So we've got this infrastructure product, call it GPUs plus GPU fabrics, and we need to deliver it to the end users. So kind of like Steve was saying, is it API based? What are those APIs? But moving kind of bottom up through the stack, and I want to go back to your statement about security, but we offer bare metal nodes, virtualization nodes, application containers, which are either curated by us or provided by the customer. And upcoming, we're also doing work now on inference as a service because there is a dominant request for, like, look, I spend up a virtual machine and running Llama 3.2. It's like, well, a lot of us are probably doing that. Why don't you just do that for us too? But the real question of like, why do you have those 4 layers? Shouldn't everyone in AI just move towards LLM or RAG as a service? Part of the answer is actually no, because there's a huge risk profile on each customer. So, and notwithstanding what terms of conditions say, but if people are using a cloud operator as a language model as a service, you're effectively renting, of course, but the operator can see the input questions and the output questions for observability. They can do profiling. They can do a lot of metadata analysis, theoretically, of saying, how often are requests happening? What are the frequencies? Like, it's good as an operator because we need to provide this service. But some people could be concerned about that potential leakage of data. And so that's a real concern for certain types of companies. Maybe we'll just call it government or high proprietary and restricted data. So what they're going to want to do is basically move down a layer. And so to the extent that you can pick up a model container, that's good because now things are abstracted, and with end-to-end encryption, I can no longer see the endpoints. And so that provides security. If that's also a concern, you can drop down to the VM layer because now I don't even know what container you're running. But VMs, technically, an operator has access to the hypervisor. So theoretically, you're at risk of maybe backups or anything, whether it's, call it a malicious internal operator, but more, or it's an internal hack, but they're all just threat vectors. One of them could be materialized. Again, if you don't want and can't deal with that risk, you drop down the layer again and have to accrue more work to yourself. And now you're on the bare metal access. Bare metal, I have no access to the computer. I have no idea what's going on other than just kind of the north-south internet gateway access. But that still is TLS encrypted. So you just keep moving down a layer to saying you're reserving more privacy for yourself, and it comes at an expense. Going all the way back up to inference as a service, you get so much value as a customer. But the personas, they have to map themselves to say, where do they want to sit in the stack? And it should be a deliberate conversation. People should probably orient themselves to the top, start at the top, and then kind of work your way down. Instead of people saying, I want bare metal, because bare metal sounds really sexy. I mean, it's an amazing term. But I would almost suggest that most people should not be using bare metal. You want to move up the value chain, go up the classic iceberg and let all the work underneath the iceberg move to someone else. And that's where the productivity is really going to hit. Yeah, that's my quick view on kind of like, so that's how we position our products, is hit people where they need it. And so we're not predetermined out of the gate what people need, but these are kind of the core offerings to deliver the infrastructure. And just maybe just to go on the infrastructure a little bit more. So what is infrastructure, of course? So we're talking, we have A100s, we have H100s, and we've also just deployed a cluster of Intel Gaudi 2 processors. So one of the things, in addition to us just being ease of access, we're also open ecosystem. Everyone loves NVIDIA, but at the same point in time, I don't want to kind of just hold on the word but. But there is a lot of things in the industry of people saying there has to be a future where there's more than one company. And we're starting to see really good things. Intel is going to become the Intel that we remember. The Gaudi 3s, the Xenon 6 is coming out. AMD's been putting out really good products. And then you got a lot of custom ASICs. So there's a really kind of interesting resurgence of core infrastructure. And so that's fun. But at the end of the day, it is also hard. I really do kind of liken even GPUs, like Jensen actually, let's say, has been calling these data centers now AI factories. That's a good term in my mind, because it really differentiates what you used to know about computers is actually different, because now it's a factory, now it's industrialization. And in a lot of cases, companies, call it mid-sized companies, they shouldn't be doing this themselves. You're not going to be performant at the operations of this stuff. You literally have to expect failures, because like 10 kilowatts in a computer, that's like three rack units high or something like that. Like the densities are high, things are going to have failures. Resilience is a big problem with nodes dropping, GPUs dropping, all of these things. So, but liquid to chip, liquid to rack, these are not trivial technologies. So I think it's really going to be interesting to see how things grow, but I tend to believe that enterprises are going to operate their core data centers either in the cloud or on-prem, but I think GPUs are going to be somewhat slightly different. I think there's going to be a big demand for cloud operators or some sort of hybrid of that nature. It's not easy. Everyone can run one GPU or put something under their desk, but now when you're talking like 128 computers, 1,000 GPUs with unblocked InfiniBand, fat tree, rail optimized, all these words, they all mean something and they're real for real reasons. So it's not a trivial space. And I think a lot of people should probably prefer to outsource it. It's hard work, just running the operations. And for us having enough experience now in a bunch of years, it's like we've stepped on these little landmines that were hidden. We've seen things and we've worked through them. So there's a huge amount of kind of operational experience it's different in the GPU land versus the, call it pre-chat GPT era.
Yeah, you nailed.
Yeah, I mean,
you were talking. It's true. I was reading some articles over the weekend. I'm a big fan. Started off my career kind of in the banking industry, or with finance was where I was heading as well. So totally love the fact y'all started off in high frequency trading. Worked with a lot of companies but the AI world that we're in, network intelligence, or bringing intelligence to the world. You mentioned it in our pre-call. System design's changed a lot. It's changing right now we're having to build things differently. It was kind of the industry, I would say, wasn't boring, but there wasn't a lot of innovation in the silicon layer. Like it was like we were doing things the same way. With cloud, had cloud. There was a lot of software, but I think the underlying way we architect, and you all are at the forefront of this, is changing and will continue to change over the next 5 to 6 years. So my question for you, Kyle, and for Steve, you can look from a software and infrastructure, what are the top technological barriers you see Denver's going to have to help customers overcome, let's say, the next 2 to 3 years? Like areas, like you said, they just don't understand. It's not as easy to deploy for AI at scale. What are you all working on?
mind if I go first on this one, Kyle?
Yeah, go for it.
Steve, go ahead for it.
Yeah, so I guess this is kind of where, talking about like technological barriers, one of them, honestly, this is like a little bit meta, but it's not just the changes that are happening, it's the rate of changes. Like one of the things like we loved about Denver Cloud was how easy it was to get up and running. Like we got up and running instantly. The machine was there, it was configured, it had everything on it. We didn't have to mess with it. We didn't have to, fool around with drivers. We didn't have to do anything. It kind of just worked. And that's important because, when you're thinking about this, okay, you want to go bare metal, right? That's actually not a very good, to Kyle's point, that's not a very good option to go for most customers because it just takes so long. You have to upskill your team. You have to figure out all these landmines. You have to be like, oh yeah, this is happening because, HLSMI is breaking because this reason, whatever. It just takes so long to get anything done if you go at that level. And to get anything done and also show value, which means it's suddenly, okay, that decision is no longer being made by someone who's a manager, manager two. That's where you're talking senior director, VP. Just from an organizational standpoint, trying to do these big, huge AI products or projects right out the gate before you've proven business value is effectively a non-starter. Just because it needs to go so far up the chain, that decision-making process is measured in, quarters. That's a problem. Whereas, hey, tokens as a service, that you can kind of, depending on how expensive it is, and from what Kyle and Rory have told me, it's pretty cheap. Yeah, you can sign up for that with a credit card. You can build a POC and show, hey, here's something promising right out the gate. And that's really important because especially if you're trying to establish business value, you don't have time to do these long decision cycles and do them all at the director level because the tech's changing so fast. So it's not just can you build it, it's can you build it and derive, business advantage from it before the entire industry just shifts again. And it's like, oh, hey, by the way, now, this new thing is out and we can, do this supercomputer. And now we can do, something that's like 0.5 of human intelligence versus, before we were at 0.3. Right. So.
And when is your competition going to adopt it, and which strategy are they going to take? Because if they take a laxer approach, then now suddenly they can move faster than you can move to get that initial benefit. And then that's going to create an interesting pressure. And I think, at least from the conversations you and I have had, Steve, the cool thing about what we've seen with Denvr is there's been a lot of acceleration that Kyle and team have been able to bring to the table in terms of making whichever layer of the stack we end up deciding to do based on that customer's needs a lot faster, a lot more straightforward, so that we don't have to burn our own engineering cycles trying to figure that stuff out. And I think that's a massive advantage overall, because ultimately, we don't want to be in the infrastructure game. And that's why, we've partnered with Dell, we've partnered with Denvr, because, they live and breathe this stuff, and that makes it faster and easy so we can focus on what we're really good at.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I totally agree with that too. And then you get kind of the next kind of layer of infrastructure is that these computers cost a lot. And they cost, and it's the numbers are like 2 orders of magnitude bigger than like a normal computer. Like a Dell 16 core server rack is probably a several $1,000s. And an H100 by itself is probably several $100,000. So the CapEx expense of these things is really different. And understanding how to fund those, how to finance them, it's like, how to operate them. The classic problem with any kind of end user is, are you just going to use it for 8 hours a day? Because you're paying for it for 24 hours a day, probably on a 5-year lease. So it's the normal cloud argument is just make it someone else's problem. Just pay a little bit more for it on the hourly, and then use it on demand and burst it, and make that kind of the utilization my problem. Let my business, let the Denvr DataWorks business kind of have to deal with that. And so that certainly creates a lot of flexibility for the client. And going back to you were saying, like, what are challenges? One of the things, like you're totally right, Steve. Like the rate of change of things, it's kind of crazy. Things that you learned 2 years ago and become an expert in, it's just like whoosh, push it in the garbage. But like it's kind of funny to say it goes in the garbage, but the process of learning that was actually still really important, even though deep neural network, like non-transformer neural networks, are less interesting. So all the work that people did on convolutionals, it's like, no, that still provides context and understanding. So the big thing that I would say for most enterprises is you just have to get started. You have to be in the game practicing. One little example from me that's not even IT related was a few years ago. We went to Egypt on the back of a trip over to Africa. So we went to Kenya, we went to Egypt, and I've seen pictures of the pyramids before. Everyone has. But when you stand in front of the pyramid, you're like, oh, this is different. Oh, it's real. And so it is absolutely right. Seeing, touching, using it is completely different. So you think you know AI, or you think you've read a lot of stuff on Twitter. It's like, just put your hands on the keyboard and do it. Even if you don't know why you're doing it, you got to get started. And so everyone has to be playing with it, because just as we discover how to use the AI tools, those are open-ended questions over the next few years. And this goes back to what, like, I don't know all of the use cases for the next 2 years for enterprise, but I do guarantee you that people should be trying to use it now, exploring it, learning it, because now you're going to be leveled up for when the next innovation happens, and then you're basically becoming ready to deploy. So obviously where we're at in the industry right now, I think Llama and ChatGPT are brilliant for world knowledge search. Like, I think it's incredible. What is the population of Calgary? What I've got this ingredient in my kitchen, peppers I just grew outside. How do I use them? And like knowledge search it's incredible. Like it's amazing, and I love that progress. But now you're starting to see the next level, and the next level to me is, like people talk about now, chain of thought and reasoning. So instead of inferencing taking like 300 milliseconds per token, or whatever your number is, however you host it, whether it's on-prem or in the cloud. I was just reading something on X the other day, and it's like, oh, my inference took 70 seconds. And what it's doing is what they're calling with O1, it's reasoning. So it's like, lay out your plan of attack. So instead of command and response, ask a question, get a response, we're starting to ask and formulate responses. So it's like, how is the psychology of the brain working? How does that map to AI? And it's starting to come out with very interesting changes. So this is everyone starting to level up AI. And it goes into something that maybe we can talk a little bit more about soon. We'll see what our time is. But where is the industry going to go in hardware? It's going to go towards inferencing. We're absolutely convinced that the size of the inference market is going to be at least 100 times the size of the training market. And I thought that before these O1 models came out, because it's a lot of like systems engineering and architecture. People should aggregate their work together. When too many people are doing the same job, if everyone wants to host Llama, why don't you just get one person to host Llama, or someone to build a framework to host Llama, and then we'll share that through open source. And so those type of aggregations really make sense. But so we're going to move into this era of more processing at the inference stage. Whereas I think a lot of the stuff in the last 3 years has been more processing at the training, and you basically create a product, then you just inference fast, and how fast can you do it. Like we're going to go from a world where an inference operation took 1 or 2 seconds to now it could take 70 seconds. And now we need new software again, new hardware to pull those things back in again. So it's going to continue to be very dynamic, but I do think that this reasoning thing is another inflection point in our industry here. And it's going to create new capabilities. It's going to create new hazards for us. And we're going to have new solutions for all these things. So, but again, I'll just go back to saying that company, like, this is so profound. Everyone is right about that. There's no mistake about the profoundness of this productivity technology. People have to get in, even if it means funding people just to do research and seeing things with their own eyes. That's the difference that people have to go. So that's one thing I definitely want to leave with everyone is touch it, see it, play with it.
Yeah, and I'm going to up the ante there for you, Kyle. So we've actually been building something for the last couple of years. We haven't released it yet, but I'll give a little teaser. We see some of these long form running jobs as being something that could take multiple days to do. And one of the probably coolest things on the infrastructure and security side that Steve and team have been building for quite a while now, because we've found that it doesn't exist anywhere. And we started our platform from the ground up when we were designing it as a full zero trust security architecture, which has been amazing because, you know, from an enterprise standpoint, that's kind of the gold standard. And it certainly helped our, you know, Fortune 50 customers across all industries, you know, feel very confident in the capabilities that we're able to provide, not just from functionality, but protecting their data. And I think one of the cool things that we've seen is that as we start to move into workloads and capabilities, whether that's AI or otherwise, that do require longer times to process, at least before this technology, this concept of zero trust and what it means from a time frame standpoint starts to break down. Because typically, you'll set some policy in terms of how long you want to have your authentication live within that zero trust system. And then when that expires, anything that you have active going on is going to get cut off. For example, let's just say that the average time window is 24 hours. So that has to be re-authenticated every 24 hours. That means that you can't have a job that extends beyond 24 hours without compromising your zero trust security posture. Because if they get access to that credential, they can basically do anything in the system, masquerading as you. So one of the really cool things that Steve and team have done is they've built a service where we can actually create slimmed down and very narrowly granular defined zero trust permissions specific to the way that one system will interact with another system for a specific type of interaction for a specific time window. So, this was an exciting and cool thing before the wave. We started it before the whole Gen AI thing exploded. But now with generative AI, I think this could be just absolutely enormous because if you think about this concept of the reasoning that you're talking about, the O1 models, and I saw a post where somebody made it and they were saying like the O1 model went off and reasoned for like 12 hours before it came back. Like I see that time just expanding and expanding because if we think about it, artificial general intelligence is on the horizon. I don't exactly know when we're going to get it. I think it's going to be sooner than people realize, but if you think about some of these enormous corporations and the benefit that they can realize by incorporating a artificial general intelligence when it is available, if they have to run a process or a job for a week to mirror some decision, but that decision is the equivalent of 1,000 man hours to do it, they're going to absolutely spend the money to run that thing for a week. Like it's a no-brainer from a scale perspective. When you incorporate things like the financial instruments, you can finance these purchases of these massive compute infrastructure and amortize that over time. And so this ability to extend these windows, I think, is going to increase. So you could have a scenario where you have a zero trust system that is fully secured with one of these jobs that runs for 7 days to get the answer. And we've actually built a system that allows you to narrowly scope down those permissions so that that one job can continue to run and deliver the value and ultimately that result, while also allowing the rest of the system to remain in a full zero trust posture. So I just think it's kind of a cool thing. I don't know, Stephen, if you want to chime in and maybe make sure that I said everything right there, but we see a lot of opportunity.
You got it right.
You trained me well,
kind of
right? That's my RAG capabilities coming in.
Yeah, no, you actually did. It was refreshing. But we kind of wanted something that was like generic, where it wasn't just for us that we were doing this. It was kind of like meant as, hey, let's be able to run this as a completely separate business unit and possibly even spin this off as a different company. Just in the sense of, yeah, hey, great, you have. I originally wanted to call this product JWT vending machines, but Ethan wouldn't let me. Said that was too hard to market. But yeah, I was kind of saying, look, we've got the JWT exchange system. You can specify roles and step down, and here's all the providers and here's all the everything associated with that. That's great, but if that's running in the same AWS account as your main stuff that's accessing that, that's not really zero trust, right? The system still is commingled. So we said, okay, if we want to be in the spirit of zero trust, which is completely, the system cannot counterfeit it, it cannot pretend to be a user without some user doing something, we need to have this running completely at arm's length. That was kind of how we did that. Going back though real quick to Ethan's point about future challenges, I think honestly one of the big ones that we're really going to see is, and I think Kyle kind of hit the nail on the head with this, is that most people aren't going to be doing training anymore. And a lot of that's just because fundamentally trying to get a real training data set, unless you're in a very specific area, is just not going to happen. like you go on the internet now, you think about like all the articles you read now, a lot of them were not written by humans, not completely, not even mostly. So like, great, now the well is poisoned. So generating training data sets, I almost think we're have to get into some kind of weird thing where we just have people just like live like, like the Amish or something and just interact naturally and then just record them just to get real human training data.
That's a good movie idea. You can make a movie about
Right? Like, right? M. Night Shyamalan should make that movie. I mean, kind of already did with The Village or whatever, but
Steve, like
yeah,
it's funny that you bring that up because it goes back to when you talked earlier about we have to find the real world enterprise use cases. So I mean, of course, it's like knowledge search. I think that's done. Like it's effective. It's really good.
yeah.
As with most people, like
Chatbots exist, yeah.
50% of my Google searches is now deflected, and I get better answers out of LLMs. But you're kind of funny, like it really shows that this is a new era of computing because people are disoriented. People are trying to do what they used to do in the new era. And so, hey, so one quick example, I thought this was funny. I think I read about this one on Twitter, and it's just like, hey, okay, I write the 3 bullet points I want to communicate to you over email, and I ask GPT to make it look smarter, and it's like, be less passive aggressive, don't be sarcastic, be nice, make sure I come across as really intelligent. So I send this information to you. It's a beautiful email memo, and then you're like, it's too much to read. So then you put it through your chat GPT, and you like summarize this, and then you basically get the 3 bullet points back that I originally wanted to you. And Gen AI kind of created this flourish, which was, it almost feels like it was marketing and polish, but we actually wanted to actually communicate the 3 core things. And for some reason, we felt it was important to apply Gen AI to puff it, I would say. But I think
first
it's
sentence
fine
has
because
an exclamation.
people are exploring and trying to understand it. But so I think no one really knows the final use cases, but people are going to find them, and this is what's really going to be exciting about the next couple of years. Is we're going to get those tailored use cases. They're going to be maybe a little bit surprising because you're like, oh, why wasn't it's going to be obvious in hindsight, but it's not obvious today, and it's going to be really good, and it'll be surprising. And this is, I think this is what it feels like to be in a new kind of technological modification. It's not going to happen overnight. It's probably going to be a period of 3 or 4 years. But I think for us as well as a business, we need to plan to retain optionality and flexibility, because I'd simply have to expect surprises and changes. And so that's kind of why we want an open ecosystem. We want to work with customers through the ease of use at the layers that make sense for them. But if we kind of pushed too hard in one product section, it would be making like an opinionated product. And I don't know if that's going to be in the end. So our core products, of course, is infrastructure and delivering those GPU cycles to customers. But yeah, the optionality, because I don't know what the future is going to look like. So, but it's going to be fun, and hopefully we're not sending those 3 bullet points marked up into 1,000-word memos all the time.
Yeah. So, I mean, this has been a blast of a conversation. The time went way faster than I realized. So we're getting close to the end here. But what I'd love to do is, from a closing thoughts perspective, I'd love to ask you both a question about like the future. And what I mean by that is, I think that we've talked about a lot on this conversation today and on other podcasts. You hear it all the time in the news. Things are changing in a really significant way in the way that we interact with other humans, the way we think about society, what even work is going to mean in the future. And, I look at the next couple of generations that come after us, and I'd love to hear both of your thoughts about, if you're a kid that's in high school, in college, maybe just entering the workforce, what advice would you give to that younger generation to say, hey, if I was in your shoes with all the experience that I have in the tech space and knowing what I know, these are the things that I would focus on. These are the decisions that I would make. These are the things that I would prioritize in my life to, get the most out of it and build a future that I can be proud of. So would love to hear from both of you on that. Dealer's choice, which one goes first?
All right, I'll go.
Cool.
All right. So, I mean, real question is, when you're doing this, previously it was kind of like a thing where you say, okay, are you going to go to college? Okay, good to go. You're set. That's not guaranteed at all. In fact, that's not even likely anymore. So honestly, giving advice to a kid in high school, if you can learn a trade just as a backup, even if you are trying to go into more collegiate environment, if you are saying, look, I want to learn this, okay, learn prompt engineering. It's pretty actually intuitive for everyone who's not like a coder, like someone who's like an English major, more liberal arts major. That's actually a pretty good thing. Learn Python, and honestly learn JavaScript for this. I mean, that what we're seeing now, especially with some of like the web LLM stuff, yeah, you can embed a local chatbot that runs on your local resources. Not going to be good enough for enterprise, but like think about like all the kind of like entrepreneurial kids. Like I remember, John, like when you were a teenager, you had a little like side business selling USB cords, or like Apple USB cords, that you got, like you buy them in bulk and sell them so that people could charge their iPhones. Like, you're trying to be entrepreneurial like that. This is where I think we're kind of entering a golden age in terms of, hey, you can suddenly compete as one person with some of the big boys for like on a business landscape, right? And you have the right hustle, you have the right drive with this stuff, you can actually hit some of those things. All you need is a credit card, all you need is being able to show revenue. You don't suddenly need 50,000 people to run a huge company anymore. You can achieve the same thing with smaller results. So yeah, learn Python, learn JavaScript. Both of those put together give you can do IAC, you can do inferencing, you can do servers, you can do UI, you can do potentially edge AI if your customers have the ability to do web LLM stuff, like if they have powerful enough machines. And yeah, learn a trade too. We'll see where this goes, but
we're gonna need a lot of electricians and plumbers.
we're
Yeah,
gonna need a lot of
good profession, man.
All right, so
Yeah,
Kyle, you want to close it out?
Yeah, I was going to say, I just wrote down about 10 different points I want to cover. So let me just kind of, I'll shorten these ones. But like,
are you going to put them into
ChatGPT? Prompt engineering is actually really important. And where I kind of abstract that too is almost just engineering and problem solving is to get the best output of your LLMs. It's really, you got to break down your questions into directions, and you're basically trying to give the LLM prompt or context. So it's kind of like I think you can really think about a lot of this LLM space in the space of the natural world. So it's like, so if I have a picture of my vacation, that's basically context for my eyes and my brain, and then I remember the memories. So I'm putting myself into the context, and I'm getting better memories and output out of it. So it's like, the same thing applies to LLMs. So you can say stuff like, you are a PhD professor, you are teaching a class of the standard model of physics, you are doing this, you have learned and you've been inspired by Feynman. So as you're giving the context to it, you're putting the, like you're basically trying to find that memory space. So the LLM is getting better answers. So that's really the key thing I think about prompt engineering is like giving this massive memory model of the entire world of saying, I want you to respond from this set of experiences and memories. So, and then how do you do these type of things? Like I'll ask questions to Llama and it's not what I want. And I'm like, change this, do this, do this. And you're having a conversation. So in a lot of ways, so I go back to, it's like problem solving is you have to be able to, so again, so let's call these like young kids, high school, universities, what you should be doing. Make sure you understand problem solving, how to break a problem down into parts, isolate one component, let it be variable, fix everything else. And so whether this is for prompting or whether it's for work, but really make sure you understand critical thinking and problem solving. It's a bit of an engineering mindset, but I think that's really important as we solve unknown problems. And then the next thing I want to say is a little bit more general is, I think everyone should try to be passionate about what you're doing and commit to what you're doing. You're going to really enjoy your time, your job, everything about it better. So come in with a positive attitude and commit. What does commit mean? If you're having a conversation with someone, like put down the phone, talk to that person. Personal relationships are going to be, they are already super important. They're going to continue to be important. And as everyone gets distracted, like I'd better check Instagram because maybe a new reel came up. But these things are all kind of competing for our attention, and they're all distracting us. And when you commit to something and focus, I would say do more of that. Focus on one thing, watch the TV show without scrolling at the same point in time, and really kind of learn. So read a book. It's hard. It's like I don't read a lot of books anymore because it's like everything's on Twitter is so fast, and it's like you slow down. But when you slow down, you go deeper into something. So that's really what I want to say is like try to be passionate, find something that you're super excited in, commit to it. And what you're looking for in those commitments is opportunities. You want the opportunity for relationships. You want the opportunity to learn. Like nothing's like a guarantee, but put yourself in the path. So go to that after hours with work, go to that little startup community thing that was at the Starbucks, and like someone's going to talk about RAG. It's like, you know what, there's 100 things on the web. Let's even just say 10,000 things on the web of how to develop a RAG system. But you know what, go to that one, the startup ecosystem at near your house or your downtown office, go to it and just see other people talking in person about it. You're going to find it's different than reading a Medium article. So, and then the opportunities of just speaking to people and hearing things happen. And I think they happen more with in person and with people than they do just reading stuff, self-absorbing stuff on the web. So I think that's something that people should really look out for at all ages, especially young, is seek the opportunities, ask for help, and ask questions.
Those awesome answers, guys.
Well said.
Thank you both for coming on, Kyle, Steve. It's great seeing you guys. Very excited about the partnership, and it was a fun conversation.
Awesome. Thanks very much, everyone.
Yeah, really enjoyed it.